Today we are playing Stay or Go with the Chargers defensive free agents led by Khalil Mack and Poona Ford, who they must find a way to bring back.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Droegemeier, and we've been covering the Chargers now for 9 seasons together, but this is our 7th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you to the everydayers out there for making us your first listen. To make sure you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got today?
Well, Daniel, the Chargers had the number 1 scoring defense in the NFL last year, and obviously they're going to want to bring back a lot of those core pieces to try to keep things rolling. And obviously at the forefront of that is edge rusher Khalil Mack. Khalil Mack was fantastic against the run last year and just the model of consistency, just one of the best edge rushers in the NFL. Without the big sack numbers, that doesn't matter. He was still great. And then you move on to the defensive line, a position group that was a big concern going into the year. Poona Ford and Teair Tart really changed the way that everybody looked at that position group, and so many more decisions about this big, great defense.
Yeah, and that's the thing. When you build the team the way the Chargers did last season, it was a lot of one-year deals, and a lot of them paid off. At the same time, though, all those guys you now have to make another decision on. So you want to know, hey, I'm going to bring back the best guys, but all of those guys probably earned a little bit more than when they started with you, because so many guys were able to have huge bounce-back seasons under Jesse Minter and this defense. But it does start with Khalil Mack and the edge rusher group in general. It's basically Khalil Mack and Chris Rumph that are headed into unrestricted free agency. Chris Rumph, I mean, if we're playing Stay or Go, that one's going to be a go, obviously, with what he was kind of faced with the last couple of seasons, just not playing at all. There's just no way you can really argue for that. But Khalil Mack, on the other hand, still playing at a top level, and we actually have a little bit of information, at least as far as what that contract could look like. We had said before, hey, this is something that could be around $20 million, and that's what Pro Football Focus thinks as well. They think 2 years, $22.5 million per season. We'll see if it ends up being a 2-year deal. I think that would be the maximum for him when he's been considering retirement and all of that. But David, that's still a number. I think the Chargers could probably get that to $20 million, right? If he wants to come back, stay home in Los Angeles. And I'm absolutely willing to play that price tag. Like, that is a for sure stay for me.
Yeah, definitely. I think Khalil Mack really is a player that makes the type of statement on the field with his play and in the locker room with his presence. I think those things are very, very important for a defense that has a good mixture of some veteran players and some younger players. But I think he is at the forefront of that veteran leadership. Yeah, he's not the biggest rah-rah guy in the world, but as players have said, when he opens his mouth and he speaks, people close their mouths and they listen to what he has to say. And obviously, why wouldn't you? As soon as he ends up retiring, he's going to get fitted for a gold jacket, just like Antonio Gates just got his. So, I mean, for Khalil Mack, it's been just crazy. 50 out of a possible 51 games played with the Chargers. Just, it doesn't matter. I mean, what injuries he's dealing with, he's been out there. 163 tackles, 39 tackles for loss, 31 sacks, back-to-back defensive grades over 90. It's just, this guy has to be a part of your future plans because there's really nobody else on the horizon absent a trade for a Myles Garrett that would be able to provide the type of production that Khalil Mack brings to the table.
Yeah, and the thing is he's still your best edge rusher, right? I mean, you could say the age all you want. I mean, he's the best guy, and outside of Tuli Tuipulotu, you don't really have an heir apparent there. You have Bud Dupree coming back this year. He's under contract. You have Tuli. Joey Bosa, I disagree with Chris Rim from the standpoint of I don't think there's going to be a way that he comes back. I don't see him getting cut and then brought back on a cheaper deal. I don't see him taking a gigantic pay cut, even though he should get credit for the pay cut he already took, right? But you're talking about Khalil Mack, 16 games, still led the Chargers with 49 pressures, still second on the team with 7 sacks, with less snaps played. I mean, they saved him this season. They monitored his usage. They kept him fresh to the playoffs, and he showed up in a big way in that playoff game with 2+ sacks. So it's not the 17 sack 2023 season, but for a short-term bridge until you can find that next guy, we all just saw how important having a dominant defensive front is. It's hard for me to imagine them having a dominant defensive front without Khalil Mack on that line going into 2025. But let's talk about the defensive tackle room. One of the rooms that surprised us most because it was thought to be a huge weakness and ended up being a strength for this team, led by the two guys we're going to focus on here, Poona Ford and Teair Tart. Morgan Fox also headed into unrestricted free agency, and man, even for him, like, still had a pretty good season for a situational pass rusher. I think for him to still lead the team in pressures, right? 37th out of 93 eligible defensive tackles and win percentage as a rusher, 40th in the NFL in total pressures at his position. But I think he's a go. To me, though, those other two guys, Poona Ford, Teair Tart, I think you keep both of them. And I think you keep both of them and add somebody to that room. There's also going to be like a Milton Williams out there. But David, I was shocked when I saw how affordable these guys could be. I mean, Pro Football Focus, I maybe these are lesser numbers than what they'll get. I mean, they definitely seem low, but I'd be willing to pay quite a bit more than what they would cost right now. 1 year, $3.5 million projection for Poona Ford, which is dirt cheap. He should get paid more. I'd feel bad if he signed that contract. Teair Tart, 84th overall on the Pro Football Focus top 100 free agents. Khalil Mack was 5th, showing you the respect he still has. Poona Ford, 76th. Both of those guys top 85 free agents in this class, and he's at 1 year, $2.5 million. I'm trying desperately to get both of those guys back. It can't be the same room. You can't run it back with that same exact group. I think Morgan Fox is the go. Both those other guys are big stays for me.
Yeah, I'm with you on the go for Morgan Fox. It's just the inability to really hold up against the run, and that's kind of been referenced with his 46.3 run defensive grade, and that's just something that, that's never really been his game. He's been a guy that's been a situational pass rusher, and hey, he provided 4 sacks according to PFF. They don't do half sacks.
I mean, 3.5 sacks per Pro Football Reference, so he's right there in third straight season doing that, which is nothing to sneeze at on the inside.
No, it's not at all, but I just don't think that he is really going to be a part of the future plans on the defensive line. That might be an area where they can upgrade. As far as Poona Ford is concerned, has a career high in sacks, had 8 tackles for loss, had 9 QB hits, was the 3rd highest graded interior defensive lineman against the run. I mean, he came in to do a job to stop the run, to be stout against the run, and he absolutely provided that at $3.5 million. I mean, honestly, you could double it, and I still think that would probably be a contract that I would be completely okay with the Chargers signing. And then Teair Tart, with limited snaps, 349 snaps, provided 16 pressures and a sack and a forced fumble, and a very respectable 76 overall grade from PFF, which that's fantastic. His previous contract was $1.125 million. Yeah, he's going to get a nice little bump up at $2.5 million. Yeah, I'm signing that contract immediately as well. I just think these two guys in the rotation already proved that they can work very well together, and I think they are part of the solution and should be part of the Chargers' future plans at the defensive tackle position.
Yeah, Poona Ford's a non-negotiable for me. I mean, I think he's second on my list of guys to bring back in general, especially at that price tag. Get him for a multi-year deal. He's still only 29 years old. You could absolutely see, and he fits, right? That's the other thing with these guys is you could go out and get somebody else, but these guys play well in those spots. So you can bring these guys back, especially if you're talking about both these guys coming back for $6 million total. Obviously, it might be a little bit more than that. But they were pivotal, and they are a huge reason why that defensive front wasn't a total liability. Get both of those guys back and add to it. Teair Tart, especially for him, man, 28 years old. This is a dude, the only thing that held him back is the amount of snaps he played. That was the only kind of interesting thing. And the only part of me that's maybe he's not a guy that's a huge priority for them because he had less snaps than Morgan Fox. So there's no reason for that, right? He also just, his 11.1 win percentage ranked 21st out of anyone with 200 pass rushing snap, with Nnamdi Madubuike, who's making $20+ million per season now. So 21st in the NFL in win percentage as a rusher, only has the 1 sack, but I don't think that's fully reflective of how dominant and how disruptive he was at times.
His impact was felt immediately when he was.
Yeah, also had that interception too, which we all want to forget because he fumbled it away. But like, he's an impact player, and like, I think he's a guy worth investing in. And if you could straighten him out, man, he could be an impact player for you on the inside for very, very cheap. But these are all stays for me. 3 out of the 4 guys, 3 out of the 5 guys. This is an easy group for me. The next one's a little bit tougher because you need a starting corner, and you have 2 starting level corners entering free agency, and also you have to find a way to bring back Elijah Molden. So we're going to talk about the cornerbacks and Elijah coming up and more on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. First, though, I need to tell you guys about LinkedIn Jobs because as a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5. Your business is always on your mind, which means when it's time to hire, you need a partner that works just as hard as you do, and that's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. When you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates all in one place. Post your job, all you have to do, LinkedIn's new feature can help you write your job descriptions and then quickly get your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. And here's a pro tip, add the hashtag hiring frame to your profile picture to double your reach of qualified candidates. No wonder 72% of small businesses say that LinkedIn helps them find high quality hires. That's just not hires. 72% hires would be a great clip. They're talking about quality hires that can stick around. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. David, let's continue playing stay or go with the Chargers defensive free agents. And we're getting to pretty much everybody today, but especially those of note. And I think 2 of the biggest names they have going into free agency are their cornerbacks because they have Asante Samuel Jr. and also Kristian Fulton going into free agency. And let's take a look at the room, right? Because right now the room is Cam Hart, Tarheeb Still, both guys who showed they could play at starter levels in 2024, even plus levels. Then you have Teair Tart, and then the kind of the ultimate wild card with Dean Leonard. Ja Taylor is unplayable at this point as a defender, right? He's on a rookie contract. I wouldn't be surprised if they brought him back because he is a good gunner on special teams, but he had the highest passer rating of anyone who played 200 coverage snaps in the NFL when targeted last year at a whopping 142 plus. Not great.
That's
but so what
horrible.
It means, yeah, I mean, it was the worst in the entire league, so it doesn't get, over 100 corners qualified.
Jesus.
But the interesting thing is you have 2 guys that you feel like could start for you because they have started for you. Yeah. And that's Asante Samuel Jr. and Kristian Fulton. And let's start with Asante because he's an interesting one and also a guy that I think it may have helped him, honestly, that he got hurt. I don't know. It's hard to say that ever. Like, that's a very, very rare thing. But in Pro Football Focus, out of their 100 top free agents, he comes in at 26th. And I would have guessed much lower had you asked me. But that's coming off of, a 4-game span that left a bad taste in your mouth. And also the Pro Football Focus projection. I mean, I've seen other fans out there that are like, oh my God, the answer to our issues is Asante Samuel Jr. And we saw in 2023, he had his best season. And then he only played 4 games last year. But it didn't look great in those 4 games. So to see a 3-year projection of him making $14.5 million per season, that right there, David, maybe there's an argument for him to stay. But, like, I just don't think there's any way with the kind of lack of knowledge of how he's going to fit and just the small sample size of him not fitting, I don't think there's any chance the Chargers would shell that out.
No, not at all. I mean, I think for me with Asante Samuel Jr., it's very obvious what his deficiencies are, and I don't think that really matches up with Jesse Minter's defense. He is definitely a player that takes some chances from time to time when it comes to tackles, when it comes to going for interceptions. And unfortunately, he has gotten only 2 interceptions each of the last 3 seasons. And, if you're going to be a guy that's going to go out there and try to make your money by taking the football away, it's either you got to do it at an extremely high clip, a lot higher clip than 2 per season, or you got to be a really good tackler. And unfortunately for Asante, he is not a good tackler at all. He has a 16.5% missed tackle percentage in his career, and it was around 20% in the 4 games that he played in 2024 before obviously missing the rest of the season which what we found out is a chronic stinger issue that he has dealt with his entire life. So those combination of things with the inability to take the football away at a higher clip and his inability to really be an impact tackler, and that lead to several really big plays and touchdowns.
Yeah.
For me, it's definitely a go for Asante Samuel Jr.
Yeah, he had 4 missed tackles, 22% missed tackle rate in 2024. And I mean, 2 or 3 of them went for gigantic plays.
Yeah.
I mean, at least the first one, Alexander Madison down the sideline, touchdown. Another one that turned into a big play later on. But yeah, I mean, he could be a good player, but I think the other part of this is like Tarheeb still has more flexibility and versatility and also had more production, right? Because he had 4 interceptions plus the play that he had to Elijah Molden, breaking up a back of the end zone ball that ended up tipping it into, Elijah Molden's hands, which is one of the best plays from the Chargers all season long. I can't see it, especially at that price tag. And I don't know if he'll necessarily make that price tag, but I think the second round pedigree and also kind of the unknown and someone thinking, okay, well, he'll fit better in my system than he did in that system. Kristian Fulton, on the other hand, David, started off incredibly hot. Like there was not many hotter quarterbacks in the league through the first couple months of the season. And then things trailed off to where this became more of a go for me because of just how things ended with him. I still think they could get something out of him. Like you could do a lot worse and he's probably not going to be very expensive, but I do think this is somewhere where they potentially try to upgrade, and he ranked 47th out in coverage out of 115 corners with 200 coverage snaps. That's not terrible. Top half of the league. The 9 penalties were the killer for me. That's the other big one because all 4 of them weren't accepted, but like one of those is an Xavier Worthy 55-yard touchdown that of course you're not going to accept it because it's pass interference and he caught it anyways. But that was the part to me that's more troublesome because those aren't going to turn into, receptions in the box score, right? But we remember it, and it was incredibly frustrating, especially during a stretch towards the end of the season where I felt like every game he had a bad pass interference called against him. But he was a great run defender too, though, which was super refreshing on the outside. Really made some impact plays out there and was solid as a tackler. But to me, David, this one is still a go.
Yeah, I mean, the beginning part of the season, he was extremely dominant. Like he did not really allow any catches or very, very few yards of any kind. But when it came towards the end of the season, from weeks 11 to week 18, he gave up 4 touchdowns and a passer rating allowed of over 108. And those 4 touchdowns were all 25 plus yards or more. And that's why you remember them, because they were big, big plays. They were the, 40, 50-yard touchdowns. And, obviously, in 2023, those explosive plays were all over the place. You saw that, almost every single game, multiple times. In 2024, that's one of the things that improved dramatically. The Chargers did not allow those explosive plays to occur and really kind of killed them throughout the season until towards the end. And Kristian Fulton, unfortunately, was a big reason why those explosive plays were hurting the Chargers. And so, for me, for Kristian Fulton, I think he did a good job of staying healthy for the most part, rebuilding some of that value. But I also agree with you. I think this is a position where they can look to potentially upgrade and get some better production and maybe someone who fits a little bit better in the defense.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think his fit was bad at all. I mean, Asante Samuel Jr. had much more of a fit question. Like, Kristian Fulton fit, and he just didn't play well towards the end of the season, in my mind at least.
Yeah.
But I do want to talk about, the safety position, specifically one safety, before we get into Tony Jefferson. If he should come back, Marcus May actually played pretty well in very limited snaps. In the linebacker unit, where there's 3 guys where I feel like you could go either way on any of those 3 guys. But with Elijah Molden, he is a huge stay for me. We touched on it a little bit yesterday, but I don't think that should mean we pass on it today because I know Chris Rim brought him up as an underrated player that the Chargers needed to bring back. He shouldn't be under the radar, and I hope he's under the radar for the rest of the league because right now his PFF projected contract is 1 year, $4.5 million. He's the 80th ranked overall free agent. What kind of muddies the waters here is broke his fibula in week 17 after tearing his meniscus in week 15. So when can he be back? It could be a situation where it's after the draft, when a signing like this happens, when he can clear a physical and all of those things. But man, out of anyone with 200 coverage snaps this year, he had the second lowest passer rating when targeted, 44.8. That's insane.
That's
tied for 12th among safeties with 3 interceptions while allowing 0 touchdowns. Also, an integral part of the defense that let Derwin James roam around. He's a better fit at free safety than Alohi Gilman is. And he had the 12th highest coverage grade in the NFL amongst the eligible safeties. This guy you have to find a way to bring back. I hope, he said, his dad played for the Chargers, right? He said he loved playing for the Chargers, and I believed him when he said it. I hope they can find a way to get this guy back, because that would open up a huge hole on the back end of this defense if they can't.
He was one of the guys that you really felt comfortable with on the back end as that last line of defense defender, and what it did to allow Derwin James to become a impact player closer to the line of scrimmage, I think is almost invaluable. So yes, this is a gigantic stay for me. He is a guy that unlocks the best part of one of your best defensive players. And so that means he absolutely has to stick around.
Yeah, and if you're talking about Elijah Molden and Teair Tart and Poona Ford and Khalil Mack, huge parts of this defense, you can bring back 4 starting level players for you and impact players for you for around $30 million, right? And if you can get all those guys back, and obviously the numbers will be a little different depending on how many years and all that might not be what their cap it is, but I think you would take that all the way with those guys. But I do want to talk about another safety who on this program said he wanted to be back with the team, Tony Jefferson. So we're going to talk about if he's a stay or go, and the 3 linebackers the Chargers have headed into unrestricted free agency, and more on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. First, I need to tell you guys about FanDuel, because when the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or you just want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in on the action, and if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting, and especially when football is over, I need to spice things up with my other sports. And right now, I'm looking at the 4 Nations Cup in the NHL because that is going on, and anytime I can wrap myself in the flag and vote for Team USA to pull it off, I'm going to do that. So tonight, I'm going Team USA over Team Finland at -1.5 on the goal line. That is what I love. Go USA all the way. And right now, new FanDuel customers can also bet get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, David, well, it's time to get into more stay or go on the Chargers' defensive side of things as they try to maintain what was the top unit in the NFL this year, scoring defense-wise. And we have to talk about the unction, and we have to talk about Tony Jefferson specifically, because he said he wanted to be back. Should the Chargers bring him back, though? We're going to get into that, but I do want to thank everyone for making us your first listen. If you need a second listen, make sure that you check out Locked On NFL, who now have 2 shows a day with Tyler the Madman Rowland, who's always just letting crazy takes off, and also my guy Tony Wiggins kicking back in the barbershop on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast from. David, the next one's hard because we have ties to it. Tony Jefferson, San Diego guy, but also an aging veteran, right? That revitalized his career and was a phoenix through the ashes, even getting back onto the field and making an impact, and played a huge role, a huge depth piece. And it's kind of like the cornerbacks, where like the reason your safeties were so good in 2024 was because of the depth you had there, right? Which is why the Chargers can't rest on their laurels in the cornerback position. Same at safety. You have Derwin, you have Alohi Gilman, 2 guys highly paid at their position, but you need that depth. And that's for me why Tony Jefferson, as a back end of the roster guy, like, I could be okay with a Derwin James, Alohi Gilman, Elijah Molden, Tony Jefferson, and a rookie safety room, especially with Derwin playing so much in the slot, right? That safety room of 4, and you add a rookie in there to get some youth, someone who can develop in that room, I'm okay with that. And when you look at what he was able to do, I don't think that, the grades are going to pay him enough justice, because I remember the physicality he brought in that Arizona Cardinals game. I remember how he impacted the game when he was able to come in. And for me, he's a stay, even as an aging player.
I'm with you. And despite what he was able to do on the field, which I do feel like his impact was definitely felt, the way he was able to shoot the gap, really explode through defenders and make tackles, like that's something that we saw Derwin James do, and Tony Jefferson showcased that ability as well. And for Tony, I think what has really made him also invaluable is his ability to help bring other players up to speed and get them on the field and be good, productive members because of his intimate knowledge of this defense. Obviously, playing with a very similar defense with the Baltimore Ravens, he's able to communicate that and disseminate that down to the younger players, get them on the field and get them productive. And, obviously he didn't play bad himself. So I feel like with his leadership, with, his playing ability, with him getting a full off season, I think you're going to see an even better version of Tony Jefferson. And yes, I am fully okay with him being a member of that back end of that safety group, because you need those veterans to help bring the young guys along.
Yeah, and I do think that, he'll probably be cheap. I mean, that's the other part of it, too. You still got to fill this roster out. I think there's many worse places you could spend, one of those 53 spots outside of Tony Jefferson, who I thought played really well. Under the radar here, Marcus May came in, had an interception his first game. For the season, though, 50% completion percentage when targeted. Passer rating allowed is 61.2. Out of anyone with 200 coverage snaps, top 35 in the league. Out of anyone with 100 run defense snaps at the position, top 35, top 40 in the league. It was a very average player, above average player, according to the numbers, somebody to keep an eye on if they go a different direction for depth in that safety room. But shout out to Marcus May, who came in, fit in right away, got hurt, and unfortunately kind of ended his run quickly, but played really well and definitely showed he still has gas in the tank, just like Tony Jefferson did. Some of the linebackers, David, because this is a group of three that I could talk myself into, any of them, right? Right now, that room is only Deion Henley and Junior Colson. Hard to trust that Junior Colson is going to make a huge leap and put all your eggs in that basket, even though he's the presumed starter in 2025. But we're talking about Troy Dye, Denzel Perryman, and Nick Niemann. Interesting. And when I ended up having to crack it down, I ended up going with a stay for Troy Dye, a stay for Nick Niemann, mostly for special teams purposes, and a go for Denzel Perryman, which hurts me, because I know he always wants to keep us hydrated. I just think that if I'm picking who the Chargers should bring back, knowing kind of what they have available to them, I think those are the two guys I'm keeping out of that group.
Yeah, it's a really, really tough one because you know who Denzel Perryman is. You know what he brings to the table from, a physicality perspective, and he really still can get downhill, and he does have some really awesome stopping power.
He does.
Unfortunately, he is an extreme liability in coverage. I mean, I think it was 19 receptions on 20 targets, 151 yards, in 340 total snaps. So you didn't play on the field a whole lot either. He's getting up there in age. So, that might be a position where they look to try to upgrade and go a different direction. And, despite how I feel about Denzel, I think he is a cool guy and a good player. But Troy Dye, I think actually looking at it, he played pretty well. He had an 80.9 run defensive grade, which is fantastic. I mean, 57 tackles, a sack and a half, 3 pressures. Only had 4 missed tackles. So for Troy Dye, I feel like he was a solid player when he was called upon. I feel like he definitely maintained the level of play on the field. And so with a guy who was mostly a special teamer in his career coming here to the Chargers with an opportunity to play more on defense, I feel like he made the most of that opportunity. And for Nick Niemann, he's always been a just solid player. I mean, whenever he's been on the field, he's been good. He's not been great, but he has not been bad at all. He's been pretty good in coverage, and he is a great special teams player, a core 4 guy. I think you definitely can bring both those guys back, and I don't think it's going to be a lot of money for either of those guys to come back into the fold for the Chargers.
I don't think so either. And Troy Dye showed you that he could give you kind of starter level snaps. I think the bigger thing with Denzel Perryman, I mean, it honestly isn't even the coverage. Like, you knew the coverage part of it going in. It's the missed tackles.
Yeah.
14 missed tackles, a 21.2%
missed
tackle rate, and he was tied for 4th worst in the NFL amongst all the eligible linebackers in that. So that's the hard part, non-factor in coverage. I mean, coverage stats for linebackers are always tough.
Yeah, so
I mean,
Troy Dye is actually worse. If we want.
Yeah, I know he is. That, So Denzel Perryman, 19 out of 20 completions on targets, right? Troy Dye, 23 out of 24. So that has been, Troy Dye was a liability in coverage. And I think the problem is just neither one of them made any kind of plays in coverage to kind of make up for that, I think that's hard. You can't always go off. You cannot go off receiving percentage for linebackers.
No.
You just can't. Like Tony Jefferson, right? You give 100% of the targets that he had this year. 8 targets, 8 receptions. The big thing there was he only averaged 3.0 yards per catch.
About 24 yards total.
Exactly. But that's why you can't pay attention to reception percentage when you're talking about coverage. Like corners and stuff like that, it's a little bit more, it makes more sense. But like Tony Jefferson was flattening people, and any kind of 3-yard reception, unless it's a 4th and 2, is going to be a good play for you for the most part. So you can't always look at that. I think with Nick Niemann, the big thing, 288 special team snaps, 31st out of 220 players that had at least 200 special team snaps in his special teams grade per Pro Football Focus. So he played really well there after missing some time early on. One of their better special teams players, and just has been nothing but solid when he's gotten the field, right? 2 missed tackles and 366 career snaps, a 3.7 career missed tackle rate, which is awesome. Troy Dye, again, 6.5% as far as his missed tackle percentage. I do think the Charge could use some juice as far as coverage linebackers outside of Deion Henley, someone that gives them a little bit more there, which Nick Niemann probably won't do. Troy Dye obviously didn't do, neither did Denzel Perryman. So you can't have all 3 of those guys back, but Troy Dye, 366 special team snaps. Nick Niemann, 288 special team snaps after missing, spending time on IR at the beginning of the season. So key special teamers should come cheap. I think both of those guys should be back. And at least in Troy Dye's case, even in Nick Niemann's case, a little bit of insurance, just in case Junior Colson doesn't take that leap going into next season. And you have some people you at least feel good about and have experience in this defense behind him, so that you're not putting all of your eggs in that basket. Hopefully they're just depth players for you and great special teams players. And Junior Colson does take that leap and forms, what could be one of the better tandems in the NFL if he's able to do it. But the way things were last year, I think it was 3rd worst Pro Football Focus defensive grade out of everyone in the league with at least 200 snaps. So he has a long way to go, but he's a rookie and it's a hard position to get good at quickly. So that is going to wrap things up for Stay or Go defensive edition. Tomorrow we'll be getting into the offensive side with some really interesting decisions. And we'll even add Gus Edwards into the mix there. What do you do with J.K. Dobbins? What do you do with Gus Edwards? Do you have a backup plan if you let Bradley Bozeman walk in free agency? Because he's a good locker room guy. Maybe he's a good depth piece. But many, many more decisions. Stone Smart. Do you bring him back? Because he really flashed towards the end of the season and started making some big plays. A lot of decisions that have to be made on the offensive side as well. So make sure you guys are back here tomorrow for Stay or Go Part 2 when we get into the offensive players heading into free agency. And to make sure you don't miss it, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from, as well as finding us every day on all of our social media. You can find us on Twitter at Locked On LAC, on Instagram at Locked On Chargers, and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page as well. You can also find it every day on my Twitter at Dan Talk Sports and David Droegemeier at Dro Talk SD. But that's going to do it for today. I think if they can bring back those guys, they'll be pretty close to not only keeping a great defense together, but being in a great spot to add to it and have that room be even better for them in 2025. And there's some big decisions they have to make on offense we're going to get into tomorrow. But until then, guys, take it easy and go Bolts.